Hello and welcome to Thoughts from the Green Room, the interview series with your host, Geoff Mays. And with me today is writer and artist Michelle Weiss.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
Yes. For those of you who don't know Michelle, allow me the opportunity to introduce to you some of her work and a little bit of her career. Started off as an electrical engineer.
Yes.
Which is interesting. I bring that up and I start there specifically because everybody I've started with so far is like arts ever since they knew it. And you started off as an electrical engineer.
Almost 20 years ago.
Almost 20 years ago. And moved towards the art.
Moved towards the art. Did quite a few changes in my career, but eventually landed here where right now I want to focus on my art, my writing specifically.
Wonderful. And that writing specifically has taken you a number of places in the time frame that you've been doing it.
Right.
For those of you out there, Michelle has published 3 children's books. In 2019, Tammy Saves the Day. 2012, If I Were. And in 2010, Maya and the Magical Suitcase.
Yes.
In addition to the 3 books published, children's books, you wrote and directed a film.
A short film.
A short film, Mom's Wedding, and that was featured in the Toronto Short Film Festival and the Philadelphia Women's Film Festival of that year.
Yes.
So 2016. And the founder and owner, I would imagine, of Tamaya Productions. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, Tamaya it is a combination of my 2 girls' names, Maya and Tammy. So they're very happy about it, and the name works.
It does. It does. I like it a lot. And coming to the most recent thing, starting back in about 2018, but currently on table, which we'll get to speaking about the most, is your newest play, Checkpoint 300, which will be featured in the Toronto Fringe, the winner of the Toronto Fringe New Play Fest, a new play, and a world premiere for you to put it up on the Factory Stage Theatre.
Very exciting.
Yes.
Starting in July 3rd.
So close, so close.
Yes.
And of course, our connection, many years of workshops and whatnot, and fortunately part of the production itself. So if you're coming out to see it, folks, you'll see me on stage there for Checkpoint 300. We'll come back to that in a little bit.
Okay.
I'm curious about some of your work, Michelle. And the first thing that sits for me in a curiosity is the books.
Yes.
What was the inspiration for the books?
So the inspiration were my kids. The first one, Maya and the Magic Suitcase, I was on mat leave, or right shortly after, with some times on my hands, and I really used it towards writing. I completed a draft of a screenplay that I worked on at the time, and then there was a trip that my mom came from Israel. That's where I'm originally from. She came to visit us, and her suitcase got stuck somewhere in the world. And then came that story. We tried to explain to Maya, who was a tiny little person, what happened to the suitcase. So the kind of the idea came, what happens if a suitcase travels now? Oh, the suitcase could be in Paris or in London or in Japan, really seeing the world, and we're here at home stuck in our living room.
Right.
So it started really as a joke. I scribbled something, the text, and then it came about to something that, maybe we can go further, one step ahead. So I found an illustrator online. He's from Australia. I never met him face to face. All the communication is online, which is amazing. I mean, if you think about it, 50 years ago, you could not have done something like that.
Not a chance.
It was so easy. And this is where the first one came about. And I chose to do it by myself, just to keep the creative freedom for myself. And also because it's so accessible and easy to publish things yourself, and you have platforms of presenting it and selling.
Right. So if I'm hearing correctly, Maya and the Magic Suitcase being the first one was a self-published children's book.
Yeah.
Did that trend of self-publishing move forward into If I Were and Tammy Saves the Day?
Yes, I liked the process. So If I Were came a couple of years later, and Tammy Saves the Day, obviously, with the title, is about the youngest daughter, because I figured she deserved it as well. The first to concentrate on Maya, because Tammy was not born yet.
Yeah.
So that's the latest. Literally came out just now, a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
So that's about the books. It's again started as something fun for the family, for the girls. but platforms today allow me to go wide.
Absolutely. Now, if I were out on the other side of that camera, where would I be able to find these 3 books?
Amazon.
Amazon.
Amazon, either with my name or the name of the book.
Okay.
It's there.
So once again, in case you haven't followed along yet, Michelle Weiss, Tammy Saves the Day, If I Were, and Maya and the Magic Suitcase are the 3 children's books that you can find on Amazon if you're interested in taking a look at that and sharing with your family. 2016 comes around.
Yeah.
Right, we've gone from the electrical engineer, which was your background. I'm going to touch on that in a few moments. But 2016 comes around, and you write, direct, and produce a short film, Mom's Wedding.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you?
Amazing. So the script was written a couple of years ago. Like every script, it's never ready. It's always being rewritten, and every time I read something of myself, I have the need, the urge to touch it again and disrupt it. But at some point I decided, you know what, I'm 40. I was 40, 2016. That was kind of my birthday, my 40th birthday gift for myself. Basically, it's now or never. You know, what am I waiting for?
Right.
So I took the script. I decided it's ready. It's about 2 sisters who reunite one afternoon to measure or try on dresses for their mom's wedding. So very simple. I tried to keep it in terms of budget. It was self-financed, so to keep it as simple as I can. So 2 speaking parts, local in Toronto. There were exterior and exterior and interior shots. The interior was done at my house, exterior in my neighborhood. So very tight.
Right.
And basically, I wanted to direct and produce as well. As a learning experience. I've never done that before.
Okay.
So really from page to screen, if you wish. And I was learning as things progressed. Obviously, I hired the rest of the team, the photographer, gaffers, actors, of course, and for post, of course, editors and music, sound and music. But I was there in every step of the process. So a great learning experience.
Okay, you've brought the learning experience forward a couple times.
Yes.
Before I go there, because that's got me spinning here. I'm curious. The 3 children's books were about your kids, obviously.
Yeah.
And family oriented. You've mentioned that before. You spoke about Mom's Wedding, obviously the title of the film, and you spoke about family experience.
Yeah.
Is all of your work drawn from personal family experience? What is the connection in family? Because all these are family oriented.
You bring a good point. I actually never thought about it. Maybe you're very right. Maybe it's the material that is most accessible to me is my own life. Sorry. My own life or experiences. Maybe. Also, when we touch upon Checkpoint 300, there are some items from my own past and experiences.
Right.
Yeah.
Also very family oriented, as I know from the script itself and being part of that. Interesting. Family experience. I've heard before, of course, as a writer, and maybe you can attest to this or shoot it down. You write from what you know, as they say, the best place to go.
I believe so, because it's personal.
Yeah. And
it's raw, and it comes out the best.
Okay. Now the other thing that I'm interested in is electrical engineer.
Yes.
That's out there in the world, by many people's standards, it's a very valid career that affords many luxuries in life.
Yeah.
Not to put down any other profession, but in terms of where it sits in that world, it's a little higher up on that ladder, right?
Yeah.
So things are well on that front. You're qualified, trained, and so forth. What drove the transition that you started working on the writing, the artist in yourself?
So the transition happened, it doesn't happen overnight. I went to electrical engineering because I loved science, math, physics, etc. It was really a natural next step for me. I found it fascinating. I started working in it, of course, and like you said, it allows you to have a certain lifestyle. But I probably don't need to tell you, art is a virus. If it's in you, it doesn't go away. You can't just keep it down or shut it off.
That is the best description of art I've ever heard. You're absolutely right. It lives there and does not go away. It's like a good flu.
Yeah, it's a good flu. It's a good virus, sorry. So it was always there. So film and theater has always been a hobby. However, I was the audience, right? So I was watching it. I only started writing or attempting to write in my late 20s after I already moved to Canada. And it was mainly, you do stuff, you put it aside in your own drawer or whatever it is, and you never touch it. But it was there. Right. So as life progresses and you experience more and you gather experiences and life events, I guess it had to come out somehow. Right. So writing took on a more dominant role in my life. However, I never left my day job. From electrical engineering, I actually moved a little bit or veered a little bit to project management in software and digital marketing industries here in Toronto, which allows me to, maintain my lifestyle with 2 kids. However, I found myself dedicating more and more time to writing. It could be in evenings, weekends, whenever I could find the time. I would scribble a scene on a piece of paper, or even in my mind, and then when I came home, I put it on page. And this is how those things were collected. Yes. So maybe not a unique process.
No, but definitely one that inspires. Speaking to someone who I've had that virus, I love that. I'm going to use. That's officially stolen right now. Officially stolen. I will refer to art as the virus from now on. I knew as a youngster that I really wanted to pursue acting and a career in the arts. But the reality of it and that ongoing struggle of the back and forth between day jobs and career choices in order to put a roof over the head, because the art doesn't always do that. So to hear somebody who was grounded initially in that make the transition because the pull is so viral, forever I'm gonna use that, is very interesting to me. That's an interesting case. I've said to other artists out there who've asked about the question about, how do you do the art, said the most important thing, which you spoke to, is the diligence. Whenever you can, finding time to scribble a page or extend the story a little bit further, that continually coming back until the body of work is big enough to self-publish, to shoot a film.
You're absolutely right. I've had many friends or acquaintances who ask, when do you have the time to write? Nobody has the time. You make the time. Right? And it doesn't have to be, okay, I have nothing else to do today, I'm going to start writing. It never happens. Realistically, we all have tons of stuff to do, so you make the time. And if the virus is strong enough, it forces you to make that time, which is what happened to me, in the past 10 or 12 years.
Well, congratulations. A lot of people don't make that transition, and they suffer, sadly.
Right.
Yeah. Choices. Do you have a process with your writing? Is there any specific methodology to it, or is it madcap?
I do. I guess I'm old-fashioned, so for me, a pen and paper is still a very valid way of putting my thoughts down. English is not my first language; it's Hebrew, and I find myself, I still think and dream and count and curse in Hebrew. So when I think of a scene, well, it starts with a character usually. When I think of a character, it's usually in Hebrew. So I create that background of the character or what happens to her. It's usually a her. It's usually a female role. And I jot it down, usually the main things with pen and paper in Hebrew. Again, whenever I can. I actually construct the entire theme and sequences of the story with recipe cards, little recipe cards. Each recipe card represents a piece. It can be a whole sequence, or it can be a tiny little bit of an image in my head. So I end up with a stack of them, and again, all very, old-fashioned.
Yeah.
And then I, usually in the living room on the floor, I put them all down and I start playing with timing. What comes before what. I also use colors, so different colors. I mark each recipe card with a different color, meaning what theme it belongs to or what character appears in it. So it looks very cryptic with a lot of dots. Each dot is a different color, represents something that only I understand, and lines and underlines. Very funny, actually.
If I were to see it, it would look like chaos, but organized in your head.
It would look something like a 4-year-old did.
Right, okay.
sometimes we call it art, but it's still something like a 4-year-old did. And then with my stack, which is still very much in Hebrew, the translation process starts. Because you cannot publish anything in Hebrew here in North America if you want anyone to understand it.
Right. Or a wider audience at least. It's a very small community that would follow you.
It has to be translated to English. So I have a software, a very nice software it's a cork board software where each one of my recipe card is then translated to English, and it's very digital. So it's still with the recipe card idea. I can move it with my finger until I'm happy with the structure. Only then I actually take my laptop and I use Final Draft, and I actually start putting it in the format and the language that the outer world will understand.
Wow.
So it's very, very interesting. You'll always find recipe cards in my bag. Not for recipes though, but for scenes or ideas that pop up, and I would write something down.
I have this image of you at a stoplight going, "Where's my recipe card? Where's my recipe?"
Oh yeah, it happens.
When the moment inspires. And I hope this is a straightforward question. Was your process, or is your process, something that you actively designed, or did it come organically as you did your first piece? You're like, I've got to get this out somehow, and that's what happened. Or was it like how am I going to do this? Sat down and figured it all out and then started.
No, I think it just came organically. Okay. I mean, we're all used to jotting stuff on paper, like notes.
Yeah.
And I find myself jotting characters, ideas, and scenes. So I just made it a bit more organized for myself with the organized, if you can call it that, with those recipe cards.
It works for you. That's all that matters.
So far.
And the work that I've seen, and that the world is definitely seeing through what's out there already and what they're going to see with Checkpoint 300, I'm quite confident that everybody will agree that what works for you is working for us as an audience.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I've got two questions. One question about Tamaya Productions, which is going to lead me to Checkpoint, because I really want to know more about Checkpoint 300. And the first is Tamaya Productions, which is the production company, yourself obviously, behind Checkpoint 300. So there's the link. Tell us about Tamaya Productions. You mentioned earlier the name comes from a combination of your children's names.
Yeah.
And what is Tamaya Productions? What's it there for?
So basically, I think it's a more organized way for me to call it what it is. It's a platform for myself to promote my work, which is very female-driven. So it's Tamaya Production, bringing female stories to life. It's basically for me to arrange my thoughts and my process and the medium. So there are books, theater, and film. These top 3 channels.
All under the same heading.
All under the same. And, I always obviously hire the right people that I need for the project. I take care of the budget itself. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Just for myself, mainly to organize myself.
Wonderful. So another way to find Michelle Weiss's work, of course, is to Google Tamaya Productions, or to look for that. If you see that name brand, then you know this is the lady who's behind it, bringing female-driven stories to life through that company. And that brings us, of course, to the most recent story, Checkpoint 300. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, it's going up at the Toronto Fringe, July 3 through 14. We are playing in the main space of Factory Theatre, our opening show being July 3rd at 6:30. If you're interested, check out the Fringe website for tickets in advance or at the door, of course. And it comes to Checkpoint 300.
Yeah.
Again, a family-driven story.
It is.
Tell me a little bit about Checkpoint. Tell them a little bit about Checkpoint 300. What was the Let's go with this one. What was the inspiration for it first?
The inspiration, it usually starts, as I mentioned, with a female character. In this case, Shiri, who is a 19-year-old female soldier in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. Very, very, very loosely based on my experience in the IDF more than 20 years ago now. Being a female in a male-dominated organization, a very well-oiled machine, where you're just a little tiny cog. Growing up, being born and growing up in Israel, you always know that the military service is waiting for you after high school. So that's what you do.
The reality of
That's the
being a part of
reality.
the world.
It's mandatory. You finish high school, you go to the army, and you dedicate 2 or 3 or even 4 years of your life to this massive organization. So a lot of people are extremely driven because they want to do, like Shiri said, if I do something, I want to do it right. If I'm going to invest 2 or 3 years of my life, I want to have a meaningful role, and I want to feel like I contribute. So unfortunately, there are still many roles in the army as well as in the private sector that are not open to women.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one main theme of this play. It's about Shiri, who really fights the Israeli army to allow her the opportunity to serve in a role at the checkpoint that was never opened for women before.
Okay, so play about a woman attaining the first
yes.
position.
Yeah, and that's something I also tried during my military service. I was not at the checkpoint, I was in the intelligence at the southern border of Israel, and I wanted to be an officer, which I was able to, and I wanted to come back to the same base doing a specific role and be the first woman to do that. I fought, but I failed. I failed, so I was not able to get that role. That role was assigned to one of my male peers who also finished the officer training.
Right.
I got another role, of course, as an officer, and I had a lovely time. But still, it still resonates with me.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad to say that years later, it took them almost 10 years later. Finally, there was a woman, the first woman in that specific role. So it takes time.
It does. Progress is not. Change doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Progress is one that is a slow-moving item.
So it's about Shiri. It's about a young, idealistic 19-year-old who really wants to contribute and serve her country. Mm-hmm. However, as often happens, reality and idealism clash. And for Shiri, it clashes very quickly. After she starts serving in her desired role at the checkpoint, she is part of this tragic event that we're not going to discuss. I don't want to give.
Definitely don't discuss it here.
Yes,
come and see it to figure out what the tragic event is.
But that event impacts two families, and this is where family comes into place. It impacts two families, one Palestinian, one Israeli. So two families, one at each side of the checkpoint, and it's about the human aspect of that ongoing conflict that we probably all heard about and have some opinion about. The idea is really, for me as a writer, to represent both sides as humans.
Absolutely.
And that is the second theme of the play, which is xenophobia, which is the fear or the dislike of somebody who is not like you, somebody who is different from another country.
Wonderful.
And I think we see it. I think it's unfortunately still very relevant these days.
Sadly, I agree with you that it is relevant. And I'm going to add to that from one of our previous discussions when we talked about me taking place in the play, tongue-tied there, was you had said to me, you may recall this, you may not, I recall it, you had said to me that one of the ways you want to help demonstrate the humanity of the play was by casting the parents on both sides of the border with the same actors. So myself playing the father on both sides, and Jory Morrow playing my wife, the mother, on both sides of the border. Yeah. And you said to me that choice was done as so that the audience has a tangible recognition that there is no difference. Same physical people on either side, so that there is that connection point of reality.
Absolutely.
It's not about left or right or wrong, good or bad. Human experience, and what does tragedy do to those families.
And I'm very happy that both you and Jory just jumped on this opportunity, because really what it comes down to, as a parent, you only want the best for your child. It doesn't really matter what side you were born in, because that's not something you can control. You're born on one side of a checkpoint or of a border, and as a parent you want the best. It doesn't matter what the child does and what type of circumstances they're tangled in.
Right. And you just said that you always want the best for your child. I don't have children of my own, obviously, but I can understand that sentiment of striving for the best and wanting others to achieve well. And I think it's exceptionally interesting, and to that theme, if you will, within the play, you've touched on this idea that one person achieving something, from which side of the border in this case. From which perspective is that one thing a good or a bad?
Right.
I know your play's not focusing on that, but
Yeah.
in terms of the way that things are perceived, what happens to Shiri in some case is good, from another perspective is not good.
Exactly.
And that's an interesting conflict point that affects family,
Yeah.
right?
And it really depends on where you were born. The word checkpoint really symbolizes two very different things depending on where you are. To the Israelis, it represents security, necessity even, to prevent any harm from coming in
Right.
to Israel. For the Palestinians, a checkpoint represents oppression, because it is something, it is a line on the sand, if you wish, where a checkpoint is built and very present, and they have to go through it for if they want to work on the other side, in Israel, or sometimes for treatments in a hospital, etc. And they have to present a valid paperwork, and there are more than 100 types of permits for various items. I don't even know all of them, of course. So it's definitely a very different experience than
On
on
either side.
either side.
So interesting, because both perceptions are valid perceptions based on experience, but which one is right? And I don't think either is. They're valid opinions.
They're valid.
And Checkpoint 300 is addressing that everybody has a valid opinion based on a perception and experience.
You can even say, take it one step further and say, both are right and both are wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's that type of situation, and it's interesting only from here, from Canada, Toronto specifically. Let's face it. I've been living in Canada since 2001, and it's evident that we can coexist.
Yeah.
In Toronto specifically, you have everybody from every possible country in the world, race, religion, beliefs, and we all coexist.
We do. We're blessed with a wonderful multicultural city.
But in other areas of the world, it doesn't. It's conflict.
Unfortunate.
Very.
True. And, bringing this to a little bit of a close, as you can hear, audience out there, this play has definitely a political element to it. But I want to highlight one of the things that Michelle and I have spoke about with the cast in general, that the focus isn't on the political.
Right.
It's truly a story about family and the impact that events have on families, and how family is universal. It's not divided by a checkpoint. Family is family. But obviously these elements within the writing are present. You can't write this without having a undertone of it somehow,
you can't
right?
ignore them.
Yeah, you can't
so
ignore them.
it's there in every scene as subtext,
Yeah.
because we know this is the Israeli family and this is the Palestinian family.
Yeah.
And there is a divider in the middle.
Yeah, excellent. I'm looking forward to presenting this piece. I've read a number of your works before, and I can speak from personal experience on this one. Having read Michelle's work, having workshops on Michelle's work, this specific piece, I am dying to get up on the stage.
Thank you.
I'm dying for an audience to see it and provide feedback in whatever way that they do. If you do see the show, and I hope you do, and you want to offer any feedback to us, feel free to come back to this blog and put it into the comments, or reach out to me directly through those comments so that we can communicate, and I can get us in touch with Michelle, obviously. But we're looking forward to any of that feedback that may come through. And truly, this is a piece that is very different from everything else you've done. As we say, we started with children's books, a mom's wedding, and two sisters.
Yes.
And now we're into family again with those undertones of the political nature.
Yeah.
So this is a big step, I think.
Very big. I'm very proud of this piece, and I really want to see it thriving and living beyond the Fringe Festival. So let's see where it takes us.
Absolutely. Michelle, it's been a pleasure having you in studio with me
Thank
today.
you.
To our audience, this is Michelle Weiss, my honored guest of the day. I am Geoff Mays, your host, and this is Your Thoughts from the Green Room, the interview series. I will see you in just a few weeks.